Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the Middle East, specifically May 13th, 2025, using reports from Al Jazeera as our guide.
That's right. And we've got two pretty significant developments happening on the same day.
Exactly. First, there's U.S. President Donald Trump arriving in Saudi Arabia. It's the start of a 3-day tour that also includes Qatar and the UAE.
And notably, it's his first official state visit in his second term as president.
Right. And then the second major event, quite different.
Yes, very different.
Sure.
We have reports coming in about Israeli forces allegedly bombing the Nasser medical complex in Khan Yunis down in Gaza.
With casualties reported, sadly.
Yes, casualties and injuries. And this happened basically alongside the UN Secretary General calling again for an end to the Gaza blockade.
And there's more on the humanitarian front too, isn't there?
There is. A leading global hunger monitor issued a really stark warning saying the entire population of Gaza faces the risk of famine.
The entire population. Okay, so quite a contrast there. Our goal today is to, dig into these reports, pull out the key information, think about what it means right now, and maybe uncover some questions for you to think about.
Sounds good. Where should we start? With the president's trip?
Yeah, let's start there. President Trump's tour, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE. What's the main objective, according to the reports?
Well, the reporting points pretty clearly towards securing investment in the U.S. That seems to be the core mission.
So, a primarily economic focus for this diplomatic trip.
It appears so. Saudi Arabia was the first stop, May 13th. Then Qatar and the UAE follow. This push for investment, it likely fits into his domestic economic plans.
And it could have wider implications for U.S. policy in the region, too, maybe shifting focus a bit.
Potentially, yes. How these economic ties develop could influence other aspects of foreign policy.
And the White House messaging around this, they seem keen to frame it in a particular way.
Definitely. The official statements called it a historic return to the Middle East. They really highlighted it as the first official state visit of the second presidency.
A historic return.
Yeah, and the phrase strengthening ties was used quite prominently.
Okay, strengthening ties with that clear investment angle. Let's pivot now to Gaza. It's quite a jarring shift, but it happened on the same day.
It is jarring. The reported bombing of the Nasser medical complex in Khan Yunis. That's a very serious event.
What specifics do we have from the reports about the impact?
The reports mention 2 deaths, including a journalist, Hassan Esleh. Several other people, patients and staff at the hospital were also wounded.
A hospital attacked. Yeah. And the international reaction, you mentioned the UN Secretary General.
Yes, Antonio Guterres. He strongly reiterated his call for Israel's blockade of Gaza to end immediately.
And this call comes, as you said, with this absolutely devastating famine warning.
It does. That warning from the Global Hunger Monitor saying the entire population is at risk is incredibly alarming. I mean, think about the practicalities, the sheer scale of need that implies.
It's hard to even comprehend. What does that level of warning usually trigger in terms of international response?
Well, typically it should trigger massive humanitarian aid efforts, pressure for access, diplomatic interventions. But access is obviously a huge issue with the blockade.
Right. And the timing of this reported hospital attack, it adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It really does. Because it reportedly happened around the same time that news emerged, suggesting Prime Minister Netanyahu was planning to send negotiators back to Qatar.
For truce talks.
For truce talks, yes. So you have this potential diplomatic track opening up, or at least being discussed, at the same time as this reported attack on a hospital and these dire warnings.
It makes you wonder about the signals being sent, or perhaps the internal dynamics at play.
Absolutely. The juxtaposition is stark.
So let's try and connect these threads, if we can. We've got this high-profile U.S. diplomatic mission focused on investment.
Happening at the exact same time as a reported major escalation in Gaza and a humanitarian crisis reaching potentially famine levels.
2 very different stories unfolding side by side in the same region. Do they intersect, or are they just parallel tracks?
That's the big question, isn't it? Historically, U.S. diplomacy in the Middle East doesn't happen in a vacuum. Major conflicts often shape the context, even for talks focused on economics.
So could Trump's investment push be presented as, say, a way to promote stability? Or could the Gaza crisis actually complicate those investment talks?
Both are possible. The humanitarian situation might create pressure, maybe even leverage that wasn't anticipated, or it could be compartmentalized. It's hard to say from these initial reports.
It raises questions about, what's being discussed behind closed doors. Are these investment talks purely economic, or do security and humanitarian concerns inevitably come up.
Exactly. How much influence does that economic partnership angle give the U.S., or the Gulf states, for that matter, on the broader issues like the conflict or aid access?
And for the wider world, the international community, how do you balance pursuing these economic ties with the moral imperative to respond to famine warnings and attacks on hospitals?
It puts governments, including the U.S., in a potentially difficult position. What actions, if any, will follow these reports? What pressures might build?
It certainly feels like a moment where things are very much in flux. So just to recap for everyone listening, May 13th, 2025, we see President Trump starting this big investment-focused tour in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE.
And on the very same day, we get these deeply troubling reports about the Nasser hospital bombing in Gaza, the deaths, the injuries, and this critical warning about potential famine for everyone there.
It's a powerful snapshot of the region's complexities.
It really is. Diplomacy and dollars on one hand, conflict and desperation on the other, unfolding simultaneously. It shows just how interconnected yet fragmented things can be.
So the question we leave you with is this. As you process these two events, the diplomatic push for investment and the crisis in Gaza, what connections do you see? How might diplomacy, conflict, and this humanitarian emergency influence each other in the days and weeks ahead? What could these reports foreshadow?
Definitely things to keep watching. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.